Is it cool if I do this? What's up? My name is Clemons, and you are watching the Buzz Artist Spotlight. I got my start in music when I was really young. My family is very musical, so it was kind of our first language at home. I started playing professionally when I was about 13 years old. I had my first professional gig right before I turned 13, and it was kind of a big deal. I played for Bill Clinton's inauguration, which was awesome. And then, as it goes after that, I started hustling and going to coffee shops and clubs and saying, "Hey, what's your slowest night? Can I come in there and play?" And then building it off of that. So it's kind of a fun experience. I started playing the saxophone purely for the sake that Clarence, my uncle, played the saxophone. I saw my first E Street Band show when I was 8 years old, and I experienced the first time I experienced the applause that Clarence received upon his introduction on stage, and I was awestruck and decided that people must really like the saxophone. So it was sadly to say, it was a very vain moment in my life when I walked out and told my dad, "That's what I want to do. I want to play saxophone." And fortunately, he redirected me to piano, which I had to do first for a few years, and then eventually was allowed to play the saxophone myself.
Do you still play piano a little bit?
I do play the piano. It's it's people often ask this question of like, what's your favorite instrument? Because I have fun on a lot of different instruments. I was never able to answer that question really well until recently, when I realized that the piano is a full orchestra at your fingertips. You can cover all the bases there, and for that reason, maybe exclusively, it's my favorite instrument.
Was it so real to find yourself playing in the band that you watched at 8 years old, now being a part of it?
It was very surreal to be standing on stage and looking up at the stands and having a memory of being 8 years old, looking down on that stage, and finding my calling for the first time, and then actually standing in that place. And I guess I never thought it to be so literal when I told my dad that that's what I wanted to do with my life. I never wanted to play in the E Street Band. I always imagined that Clarence would be there forever and that he would, that was his place in the world. But I'm grateful to be there now and to be able to continue to allow his presence in some way to be there. And it continues to be surreal though, So I grew up in a really strict household where my father was a Marine Corps band conductor, and which is an amazing role, but we were only allowed to listen to marching band music, gospel, and classical music. That was it in my house. So I had to learn how to enjoy other kinds of music. I didn't naturally fall into certain things, which is a great experience. But I think it's allowed me to approach my musical endeavors in a really pure way, and maybe even sometimes an experimental way where I don't realize it's experimental because I'm just making stuff. I don't know. So this record, it's a rock and roll record, but I can definitely look at aspects of that gospel influence in some things, and I can look at aspects of the raw rock experience that I kind of rebelled against my parents and in my young teens, and I don't know, you kind of see like aspects of all the different things that you've heard growing up. So the record kind of covers a lot of different territory, but hopefully in a way that fits together nicely. And it's a story. It's a story and it's a journey. So you're gonna have parts where you're like in the jungle, and you're gonna have parts where you're in the ocean. Same characters through the whole journey. So it's I don't know. It's a 2016 record. I'm a songwriter, so I make a lot more music than people hear. I often will write a lot of songs and then figure out what the story is that I want to tell, and then pick the different songs out that fit that story, that fit that theme. That being said, I've got a concerto that I've been working on for a little while. I've got, concepts for jazz records and, obviously rock and roll. So there's a full gamut that's out there, and I would expect that at some point we'll get a taste of all of those different things, and whether or not they're good or not, or people listen to them, will be a different story. But I intend to keep creating, freely. My approach to this record is one that is today maybe considered to be a bit old school, in the sense of it is a complete album concept. It's got a heavy theme, and it tells a story, from the beginning to the end. So I'm hopeful that people will give it the chance to be able to listen for that, and to hear who the characters are in the story, and to hopefully connect to it somehow. I think I was 22 years old or so when I realized that the saxophone is kind of a vanity instrument, or a luxury instrument. If somebody who's really wealthy has a boat and they hit hard times, the first thing they're gonna let go of, as much as they love that boat, is can't afford that thing anymore. So I don't have this awareness that, like, as a saxophone player, I kind of play that same role. I'm really gonna enhance the sound of this experience, but at the end of the day, if times get hard, they might let me go. So I figured this is a good time for me to learn how to play the guitar and start working on my own music. And so I started writing music a lot in my early 20s, and started to record my own music in my early 30s. So it's I guess it's come full circle in that sense. The first thing I understood about music was its ability to connect people. It's its ability to bring all these different people together in the same moment, in the same breath, to experience the same essence, inside of a moment. For that reason, music has continued to be a tool to achieve that experience. So for me, as an individual, that's why I have been driven, I suppose, to be able to create those experiences on my own. For me, the thing I'm most aware of and most concerned about is making a connection with everyone in the room, and making it a real moment for each of us. The furthest reaches, whether it's an 80,000 person room or an 8-person room, that everyone feels aware of the moment and present, and that we are experiencing the same essence at that time. And that's what drives me to create as a solo performer. I'm a songwriter. That's just the reality of who I am. That's how I identify with the world. That's how I process my day. So more so than being the front man, or the person that's leading the experience, I have to write music. It's how I process the realities of my life. I'm fortunate enough to be able to also share those experiences with other people through that format. So having a live experience becomes a really beautiful and real and vivid thing. In terms of the record, Fear and Love, a lot of people create music for the sense of like being able to get away from your life for a little while, or to escape into a fantasy and have an hour of relief, and that's really important. This record does not do that. This record is about dealing with life. And as a musician, as somebody who creates music, that is kind of what I stand for. This record is about recognizing the realities of where you are in your life and reconciling those realities. I can't say that word. Reconciling your fears and allowing yourself to understand who you are and to find a way to love who you are and to love other people outside of that. So it's not a fantasy, it's not an escape, but hopefully it's a relief because we're dealing with where we are. My name is Jake Clemons, and you've just been buzzed.